Welcome to another episode of the Federal Newswire Lunch Hour Podcast with your host, Andrew Langer.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Federal Newswire's Lunch Hour Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Langer. So glad I could join you, and you can join me today. If you're watching us on our YouTube channel, check us out on one of the many fine podcast platforms that are out there. Also, we have a brand spanking new, actually not so new, X account, Twitter account at Lunch Hour Pod. Please go and follow us there and let all your friends and family members know how much you're enjoying the show. I always like bringing back a guest, especially one with William and Mary connections. It's been that, by the way, Curt, it's been that kind of a thing. We've had a couple of different folks with William and Mary connections on the show recently. But Curt Mills is my guest. He is the executive director of the American Conservative. He previously served as their senior reporter and contributing editor. He specializes in foreign policy and campaign coverage. Worked at the National Interest, U.S. News and World Report, Washington Examiner, and The Spectator, and his work has appeared all over the place. He was a 2018-2019 Robert Novak Journalism Fellow. He's done a bunch of different things. Curt, as I said, so glad to have you back. I mean, there are things that are working around the world to make things less chaotic, but there's a lot of chaos going around the world. Talk about where things stand now, 6 months into the new Trump administration.
Sure. I mean, the administration, I think, is top line, absolutely mired in the Middle East mess. The Gaza war shows no signs of abating. In fact, if anything, with the press coverage as of taping today, the Israelis have decided to enter Gaza and occupy it, I should say. They've obviously already entered Gaza in a significant way. There's substantial chatter that the Israelis will try to reopen the war with Iran come autumn. And if you add in the Epstein scandal, where the prime suspect is Israeli intelligence, frankly, this is just choking the administration's ability to get anything done. And it's really been as I repeated, just a unfortunate and shocking turnaround from what I think was a pretty sterling administration for the first 4.5 months. This has become, in the last, not even 2 months since the Friday the 13th strikes in June, become just utterly captured and distracted by effectively neoconservative foreign policy prerogatives, dovetailing onto that probably secondarily, although in theory the more dangerous war, because it's with a nuclear power, is the Russia-Ukraine war, where Trump has totally lost patience with Vladimir Putin and the Russian state, very bureaucratic culture, also in a negotiating party that, contra Iran, is probably less interested in ending the war, relatively speaking. And so he's utterly frustrated there, and he's escalated there as well. And it's no real surprise that the people who want to escalate in the Middle East are so often, it's complex, but there's very often simpatico with those who want escalation in Eurasia. So, yeah,
I've got a complicated question, and
Sure.
It's two parts, but I want to give you plenty of time to answer both.
Right.
So just stick with me for a second as I walk through this thesis, because the part one of the question is, what's different between now and the first administration? But part two, and I want you to take both of these and spend as much time talking about it as you want, because
Okay.
I was on a radio show this morning talking about how so much on the regulatory and economic front was, and I think some of this was true with the first term on the political side of it. The Obama administration did what they could to frustrate the ability of the incoming Trump 45 presidency to achieve their goals, right? They really seized on the chaos of the first Trump term. In the second Trump term, Joe Biden or Kamala Harris loses the election, and the outgoing Biden administration does what they can to frustrate the economy, right? And economic success. So they killed 100 million chickens to keep egg and poultry prices high. They tried to lock up offshore drilling permanently to keep oil prices high. So my question is there a relationship here? How much of this problem is related to mismanagement by the Biden administration trying to do what they can? So it's two questions, right? what's different between now and Trump's first term in terms of who's managing these things, and how much of this can be blamed on the Biden administration holdovers or the policy holdovers frustrating an ability to do stuff, nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll take the second question first.
Yeah.
I mean, look, in any human organization, if you take over from a predecessor, especially a predecessor with whom you potentially sharply disagree with, there's going to be a lot of work in reforming it in the direction. And, forensically speaking, it is somewhat accurate that it can be the fault of your predecessor effectively for some time. But that being said, relying on that too much just is not super inspiring.
Sure.
And B it just has loser energy. The argument the Republicans are making is that Biden was a cadaver and didn't run the government. Meanwhile, they're blaming Biden for everything. It's not fully coherent. And then additionally, President Trump has been elected twice. He has dominated politics in the United States for a decade. I think people are, I understand, the United States is not tabula rasa. Any administration is not going to inherit a tabula rasa, clean slate circumstance. But the reality is they want to see what he is about now. And particularly with this sort of, exhuming of the Russiagate scandal, which is, I think, again, Russiagate was a scandal. But the United States rendered its verdict on that. They reelected President Trump in 2024. I don't think the average American cares about Russiagate that much, or else they wouldn't have voted for him in the popular electoral college. To just, focus so much on Russiagate, blaming Obama people, blaming Biden people, it's just, first of all,
Sure.
First of all, and additionally, the Trump campaign ran on against criminalizing politics. So, floating indictments of Obama, just the whole thing smacks of hypocrisy and away from what they should be doing. So, yeah.
Well, listen, I not that I want to, have this as a debate. What I want to hear from you on this stuff. Let's shift over to what they're doing, right?
Sure.
And you talk about Friday the 13th, June 13th, and the decision that was made there. And I'd offered up the thesis at that time that, if the U.S. hadn't done it, Israel would have. My thesis was that Israel had said, "Listen, if you guys aren't going to do this and you're not going to give us the weapons to do it, we're going to use our nuclear weapons." And that was a bridge too far for many people in the administration to do. So, out of a series of bad choices, doing nothing, letting Israel take the brunt and possibly using tactical nuclear weapons, or the United States using conventional arms, the United States made that decision. And I don't know if you agree with that. Again, that's just a theory on my part.
Do you have any is it speculation, or do you have any?
No, it's all entirely speculation. It just sort of based upon, laying out the various choices that are out there. I think
he's a bad actor, but I haven't heard anywhere that he would use a tactical nuclear weapon.
Oh, I see. I've been hearing chatter in international media for the 2 weeks leading up to Friday the 13th that, I had a friend sort of very well versed. Hey, just mark my words. Israel's about ready to use a tactical nuclear weapon. Israel's about ready to use a tactical nuclear weapon. But
I've never heard that. Okay.
Right. Well, my question is, does this all stem from? Is it a series of bad decisions that stems from the U.S. involvement in June of June 13th, or was there stuff preceding it and it just sort of continued there? Where did U.S. foreign policy vis-a-vis Israel and Iran go off the rails in this administration?
June 13th. The Israelis gambled. They wanted to draw the United States into the war. I think any discussion of attacking a nuclear weapon from the Israelis is a bluff, and if it's not a bluff, then this is not a U.S. ally. This is the most dangerous state in the world if they're going to use a nuclear weapon. I don't like. Just,
well,
that can't be rewarded.
No, go ahead. Keep talking.
Especially because Trump cares so much, allegedly, about the quote, the N word, nuclear proliferation.
Yeah.
The Israelis break the nuclear taboo. Just every nation in the world should isolate them. I've not heard that. So so that should be put aside. I think additionally, they exist in a state of nuclear exception. They don't even confirm or deny that they have a nuclear weapons program. It's if this was any other country, if Iran did that, if Turkey did that, if Germany did that, no one would accept that. So there's this insane double standard for Israel. But that's sort of besides the point. Yeah, and I think Netanyahu gambled. He drew the U.S. in. I think the Israelis can't do what they want, which is regime change in Iran, and so they're going to continually try to claw back the U.S. in. And Trump has to decide. Look, he can try to do this. He can hope there's not a recession. He can run a baby boomer Fox News style presidency. He can run George W. Bush's third term. He can try to say anyone who's questioning any of this is a defector. He can say he is the definer of MAGA, and anybody who disagrees with him on any day is not true MAGA. He's welcome to do that. He probably has 30 to 35% of the country. He will lose Congress. He will get impeached, and he very plausibly could be toppled from office if that is the environment he's operating in. And additionally, he will be betraying the ideological campaign pledges that delivered him the presidency in 16 and 24.
Well, let's sort of talk about, if you were waving your magic wand, Curt, and we're in charge of this foreign policy. Let's start with Israel, Gaza, and Iran, which are interrelated, but I think somewhat separate issues, right? The issue of Iran, and I dare say that so much of U.S. foreign policy over the last 25 years has been about keeping Iran in check, and some of it, obviously, I think not having troops on the ground nominally, well, certainly not having troops on the ground in Afghanistan, not having troops directly in harm's way in Iran in the same way that they had been for 20 plus years. Not having troops on the ground like that is a different way of keeping Iran in check. But wave your magic wand. Where do you see all of this playing out?
What I do, or what I think is going to happen.
No, what would you? If you could wave your magic wand, what would the United States posture be, and where would the relationships be between Israel and Iran, and Iran and the rest of the world, and the Palestinians and Israel?
Well, the short-term answer is I think Trump should pull the plug on Netanyahu. Netanyahu is going to be a generator of war for as long as he is in power. So the U.S. should have no business supporting the specific elected officials of a foreign government. This is utterly ridiculous and is ruining American foreign policy. So that's the start. From there, I would pull weapons sales to Israel. I think that forces an end to the war. If it doesn't, you have to assess from there. I don't think the Israelis can do this without U.S. weapons sales and U.S. financial support. And then from zooming out, I think the U.S. can achieve a détente with Iran. I think on the table before Friday the 13th was a deal that was better than JCPOA. It was better than the Obama-Iran deal. They should have signed it. And moving on from there, I think there's the question of Palestinian statehood. Myself, I'm sort of agnostic. I don't even know if a two-state solution is really on the table anymore. Theoretically, I think that would be preferable to ethnic cleansing. But I think, the U.S. should look at, what it's doing there. But the reality is the U.S. is constantly involved in this because it is the protector of every Israeli whim and every Israeli, act of violent daring that sucks the U.S. back into the region, and it's making us isolated. Doing everything Netanyahu wants is the real isolationism. The U.S. is fighting with its oldest allies over Palestine. It's fighting with Canada. It's fighting with the UK. It's fighting with France over Palestinian statehood recognition right now. The administration is making economic policy based on recognition or not of Palestine. It is infecting everything.
But, what about folks who say, well, okay, Israel has been the U.S. most staunch ally in that region for more than half a century.
What have we gotten out of it? What have we gotten out of it? Well, seriously, we've gotten an endless war. We have gotten millions of Middle Eastern refugees. What has the U.S. got? Why do we need, number one, why do we need an ally in a region that is of very limited strategic interest to the United States. We're a net oil export.
I mean, I guess what you're talking about is, hold on for a second, Curt. What you're talking about is a chicken and egg problem, right? I mean, it was the U.S. support for Israel that led to, Iran to declare that the U.S. was the great Satan, for international terrorism.
Actually, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Very, very clearly. Yeah. I mean, read what the radical Islamists actually say, not to defend their actions or their beliefs, but the core. I mean, even Osama bin Laden, like actual line number one is U.S. support for Israel, U.S. bases in the region.
But it comes down to ultimately, at what point should the United States have, right? I mean, we recognize that in the wake of the Second World War and the Balfour Declaration and the creation of the State of Israel and the international community in the wake of the Holocaust, the U.S. felt that it had an obligation to support this nation. What you're saying is, at some point in time, the U.S. should have pulled back and been more agnostic when it came to the existence of a Jewish state over the long term in the Middle East.
I was born in 1990, so for me to comment, too prescriptively on events that were 42 years before my birth, I think is sort of ridiculous. But diving into the history, parts of the U.S. establishment wanted to do Israel thing. I think there's reasonable evidence that if Truman had lost the election in 48, we might have had a slightly different formulation of Israel's foundation. I mean, the Truman presidency across the board is a catastrophe. I mean, the use of nuclear weapons, the signing of NAFTA, the opening of the Cold War, losing China, Israel founded the way it was founded, which is, he's one of the worst presidents in American history, in my opinion. Certainly by the 70s, certainly by the time the U.S. was bailing the Israelis out in 1973, and certainly by the time that the U.S. is involved in all these negotiations, and everybody knows it's tipping its hand towards Israel, I think that was getting clearly inappropriate, and I think there was massive blowback in the region for those decisions.
Well, and then, I mean, you of course you have to add into this, the Cold War politics of the time and who was supporting which states at which. I mean, it's one of those things where I was in North Africa 15 years ago, visiting again with a William and Mary alumna, visiting the refugee camps of the Sahrawi people, and because Morocco was a client state of the United States during the Cold War, and because Algeria was a client state of the Soviet Union during the Cold War, when Spain pulled out of Western Sahara, or Spanish Sahara, and Morocco invaded, the U.S. supported Morocco, and the Sahrawis fled across the border to Algeria. When the Soviet Union fell, all of a sudden the Sahrawis were left without a real client and sort of these international pariahs. It weirdly enough, it was a very strange moment flying back from Tindouf Airport to Algiers in a Soviet-era IL-76 cargo plane. Was a thing. But but let's now draw Russia back into this, because we are now 3.5 years into the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Obviously, the president made rumblings in various ways while he was, in between his presidencies, while he was running for president the second time. And now as president, again, waving your magic wand, what ought to be happening? What should the Trump administration ought to be doing vis-a-vis Ukraine and Russia?
I mean, the U.S. should not be supplying any more arms to the Ukrainians. And then from there, because it's a party in the war, it should try to negotiate an armistice at this point, since the actual negotiations have broken down so much. I think the Korea model is not a bad model. So Zelensky doesn't have to be at the table. The U.S. can sign an armistice with the Russians, and Zelensky can maintain his domestic credibility as in claiming the U.S. stabbed him in the back or whatever.
But a Korea model in which the United States maintains troops in Kyiv, or
no,
okay.
You freeze the battle lines.
Oh, I see. Got it.
Yeah. So you freeze the battle lines in the four oblasts, and Russia has de facto annexation of 20% of the territories, which they're gonna have. This is over.
So where do you think the sticking point is right now? I mean, it's because obviously, Lord knows the president has been no friend of Zelensky, publicly, bringing him here and sort of telling him about the realities of the deal. Do you think the president's been surprised at how uncooperative Vladimir Putin has been in all this? Or am I misreading it? Is it not Vladimir Putin who's been uncooperative in all this?
Maybe. I mean, I think two things are going on. Three things. Number one, the Russians are a bureaucratic society. It's a different country than the Soviet Union, but there's obviously inheritances there. A lot of meetings, a lot of paper going around. Trump himself has, in the Iran negotiations, showed a clear distaste for that. So there's that. Number two, the Russian demands are objectively hardline. They are asking for territory that they have not yet conquered, although I think they may very, very well imminently conquer. Number two, they are asking for the creation of basically a neutral state, which is perhaps a little bit tough medicine to sell to the U.S. population, or at leist the U.S. elite population. And then, number three, they're asking for military guarantees that I don't want to quite say Weimarize Ukraine, but like defang some of its military capabilities and maybe intelligence sharing with the U.S. In my view, Ukraine was the driving force on taking down Nord Stream, or at least that's the available evidence. And obviously the Ukrainians have shown capability enough to drone strike into Moscow. That's obviously anxiety creating for the Russian state, understandably. So I think it's tough. And then third, I think there's, the reality that right now, Russians don't need to necessarily demobilize. And by Russians, I mean Russian decision makers. You're going to bring back hundreds of thousands of men with paltry employment. Demobilization can affect the state. I think the Russian state's fairly secure, but obviously the Prigozhin episode 2 summers ago showed the limits of its security. And so I think these are all tough. But again, these are no justifications for sending fresh arm packages. These are no justifications for sending potentially two nuclear armed submarines in this vicinity of Russia. These are no justifications for doing every whim of Zelensky, who will fight this war to the last American dollar. And so, although I think the negotiations with them are technically more complex than the Iran negotiations, which I think should be easy and would be easy without the existence of this Israeli government. Just because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. We should freeze the battle lines. We should sign an armistice yesterday.
But going back to actually, let me go here because you've written some about this. This piece got sent over to me about the role of the Ted Cruz Republicans and all of this. Talk about that.
Sure. This is written by one of our contributors, George O'Neill Jr.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, and this I think a seminal moment. I've just heard it in just endless conversations. Pretty influential people. This debate between Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz, and Cruz, who is a self-professed Christian, devout Christian, he says, cites basically a biblical interpretation of why the U.S. should support the state of Israel. He's literally getting into, in the interview, the details of, in the Old Testament, when God says Israel, he meant literally Benjamin Netanyahu's Israel, which is obviously ridiculous. Additionally, Cruz, in that interview, shows complete ignorance of the country that he wants to topple. He didn't know the population of Iran. And so I think George aptly gets into some of those hypocrisies and contradictions. And then additionally, I think, the meta thing that's going on is that, there's a lot of elite support in New York and Washington, D.C. For these wars, but the real political bulwark of, undying slavish support for every Israeli endeavor is older evangelicals in the United States and in the heartland. And if you see, especially among younger people, but even among older people, I think particularly women, these images, just anecdotally, I think are changing minds. Case in point, Marjorie Taylor Greene, whatever you want to call it, she's in mid-50s, early 50s, changing hearts and minds on that. If the evangelical support attrits or breaks in this country, I think it is game over for the current Israeli-U.S. dynamic.
Let me ask you this, because, George O'Neill was very big, and rightly so, I think, in trying to raise the issue of getting Congress more involved in American foreign policy, the reassertion of Congress's powers under the War Powers Act. But obviously, it's tough if Congress is lockstep in sort of following these things. If Congress has this power to get involved, or has the power to get us involved in war zones, and Congress is pushing for greater involvement in these areas, how does that square with this idea of making sure that Congress is involved in America's war powers?
Well, the reality is that the current United States Congress is a lobotomy factory. I mean, it's a series of non-entities with honorable exceptions. So yeah, I take your point, but I mean, in terms of just like good governance, from a Jeffersonian Republican standpoint, you should have a Congress that's a lot more assertive and involved in declarations of wars than it is. We have all these undeclared wars. It's like ipso facto, like clearly unconstitutional in a certain sense. Of the United States was engaged in the quote 12-day war with no formal declaration of war from the Senate. So and then also especially because both sides kind of use this sort of cynically, right? Like if the U.S. Actually did sign. And it's hilarious that the president's friends of the week du jour, Mark Levin, Lindsey Graham, Tom Cotton, these kinds of figures, cite when things aren't going well for them, they cite congressional oversight. So if Trump had signed an Iran deal, they were messaging in early June, late May, I believe, this has to be a treaty. We're gonna have oversight over this, and so it's very cynical. I think in the abstract, we should not have an imperial presidency. We do, but in the the meta thing here is that Marjorie Taylor Greene's very famous. She's a very important politician. She's a big voice on the right, and her breaking on that is the blocking and tackling reality of why this matters. And I think it's significant. It's being talked about.
Is it interesting? Is it interesting then that at the same time we talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene being the big break with Republicans, we have John Fetterman as the big break with Democrats on the opposite side of the issue?
I'm not really sure who Fetterman represents other than New York and Washington, D.C. I don't think he'll be reelected. I think he is openly mentally ill and being taken advantage of. So I think, Taylor Greene has an actual constituency. Fetterman has a sinecure.
Interesting. Well, listen, Curt, let me, because I asked you before, just remind everybody, when you're not doing this kind of work, what kind of things are you up to? What are some of your outside interests?
Oh, this is pretty much consuming me at the moment, but I can enjoy a glass of wine, and I'm actually fairly into watches. Those are my two main hobbies.
There you go.
I try to balance them because one is too bad for your health, the other is too bad for your wallet.
Yeah, I've been debating whether or not I finally need to start wearing a watch again. I'd forsworn it for a while.
It's easy. It's easy. There's tons of affordable timepieces now.
Yes,
and so you don't have to spend grands. So.
Yeah, right now the only timepiece I have is Eric Clapton's best of album. So anyway, Curt Mills, thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Andrew.
Our guest has been Curt Mills. He is the executive editor of the American Conservative. Previously was their senior editor and contributing editor. As always, come check us out on our new X account at Lunch Hour Pod on X. If you're watching us on YouTube, listen to us on one of the many fine podcast platforms that are out there. If you're listening to us, check us out on YouTube. I'm Andrew Langer, your host. Enjoy the rest of your lunch.
This has been the Federal Newswire Lunch Hour Podcast, hosted by Andrew Langer. Check out the Federal Newswire's family of websites, as well as their social media stream.